Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, we're going to talk about something a lot of elk hunters don't want to hear, but need to understand. The majority of elk hunters never become consistent, not because they don't care, not because they're not putting in the effort, but because they never fix the real problems that are holding them back. And if you've spent any time doing this, you know what that effort looks like. The miles, the early mornings, the long days, the money spent on gear, tags, and travel, year after year of trying to figure elk out and still not getting the results you expected or want. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter and outdoorsman. Here's the truth. This isn't random. Elk hunting failure is really pretty predictable. It follows patterns and it comes from specific decisions repeated over time that a lot of elk hunters never recognize. And that's what this episode is all about. This is a clarity shift because the reasons a lot of elk hunters struggle has nothing to do with calling better, having the right gear, or getting lucky like I hear a lot. They come from something deeper: how you think, how you decide, and how you approach the entire hunt. Once you understand that, everything is going to start to change for you. Reason number one that elk hunters fail is because they hunt elk like a location problem, not a behavior problem. And this is where most elk hunters start and where most of them go wrong. They treat elk hunting like a location problem. What unit should I hunt? Which basin holds elk? Where is the best spot? And they spend years chasing better locations, better maps, better pins, believing that if they could just find the right place, everything would finally come together. And though all of those things are important, right? But that's not exactly how this works because elk aren't static. They don't live in one spot. They don't follow a fixed pattern that stays the same year after year all the time. They move constantly based on pressure, weather, feed, and security. So when you focus only on the where, sometimes you can miss the bigger picture. You might be in the right place at the wrong time, or hunting the right terrain in the wrong conditions, or sitting in a basin that should hold elk but doesn't anymore. And that's why guys can hunt great country and still never find elk because they're ignoring behavior. Elk hunting isn't about just memorizing locations either. It's about understanding how elk use the landscape and how that changes from day to day. Once you make that shift, everything is going to start to make more sense for you. You're going to stop asking, where should I go? And you're going to start asking, how are elk using this spot right now? Because the truth is, elk hunting isn't about where necessarily, it's more about how elk use the where. Reason number two elk hunters fail is because they overvalue effort and undervalue decisions. This one hits a nerve because effort is something every elk hunter takes pride in: hiking further, staying out longer, pushing through fatigue, grinding day after day. And there's absolutely value in that. This is a hard hunt, but effort alone doesn't create success, or effort focused in the wrong area doesn't create success. A lot of elk hunters believe if they just do more miles, more time, more elevation, they eventually run into elk and things will come together. But what actually happens a lot of times is they repeat the same low quality decisions just at a higher volume. They hunt the wrong areas longer. They force bad wind setups deeper. They chase instead of positioning, just faster and further. And that's where effort becomes a trap because elk hunting isn't a volume game, it's a decision making game. One bad decision, hunting a dead area, committing to the wrong wind, pushing when you should wait, can cost you an entire day, sometimes multiple days. But one good decision, correct positioning, reading movement right, trusting the wind, those can create an opportunity almost immediately. And that's the difference a lot of elk hunters never fully understand. It's not about how much you do, it's about what you choose to do and when you choose to do it. Once you start valuing decisions over just effort, your entire approach changes. You become more intentional, more selective, selective, and more effective. Because the truth is simple here: you don't kill elk just by working harder, you kill them by working harder and smarter in the right moments. Reason number three elk hunters fail is because they chase encounters instead of building them. What I mean is, this is where, a lot of elk hunters get like feeling like they're close, right? But never actually close enough, sealing the deal. They hear a bugle, see a movement, or cut a fresh sign and immediately go into reaction mode. Close the distance, move now, make something happen. And if the moment feels right, it feels aggressive. It feels like you're finally doing what it takes. But more often than not, that's exactly how encounters get blown and fall apart, because you're not building the situation, you're reacting to it. Chasing bugles pulls you into the elk's world on their terms. Rushing setups leads to bad wind, poor positioning, and blown opportunities. And when decisions are driven by adrenaline instead of awareness, small mistakes start to stack up fast. That's reactive hunting. Controlled hunting looks different. You're going to slow down. You evaluate. You pay attention to direction and terrain and wind and timing. And instead of just trying to catch up to elk, you start positioning yourself where they're going to be, because real encounters aren't found, they're built. They come from putting yourself in the right place with the right wind at the right time and having the patience to let it all develop. That's the shift a lot of hunters never make. They try to force something to happen instead of setting conditions where something will happen. And that's why they stay stuck in that cycle of almost. Because the truth is, most elk hunters try to catch elk. Successful elk hunters make elk walk into them. They already know where they're likely to be. Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons, I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations and Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post-Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory. It's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. Reason number 4 elk hunters fail is because they don't understand pressure or how elk respond to it. Public land elk are not the same animals you see in magazines a lot of times, or shows where they're hunting private land, or even early season highlight clips. They're shaped by pressure. Every boot track, every bugle, every hunter moving through the mountains changes how elk use that landscape. And the more pressure they feel, the more they adjust. They don't necessarily disappear, but they adapt fast. Elk that were visible in open parks shift into cover. Movement tightens up. Travel becomes more controlled, more deliberate. Daylight activity shrinks, and in heavily pressured areas, elk start leaning more nocturnal just to survive. They also stop using predictable terrain, the obvious basins, the easy to access meadows, the perfect looking spots. Those are the first places pressure hits, and elk learn that pretty quickly. But here's the mistake a lot of elk hunters make: they keep hunting those areas anyway. They hunt what should be ideal elk habitat instead of adjusting to how elk are actually responding to pressure in real time, right now. So they end up in great looking country with no elk in it. The better approach is to think in terms of pressure adjusted habitat. Where would elk go once pressure hits? Where do they feel safe when everything around them is being hunted? That's where you need to be. It's probably the nasty stuff because terrain alone doesn't dictate elk behavior. It's the pressure that puts them there. And if you don't account for that, you're always going to feel like elk have vanished, when in reality, you're just one step behind them. If you ignore pressure, you're hunting where elk used to be. Reason number five elk hunters fail is because they hunt without a system, random in, random out. This is one of the biggest separators between elk hunters who get lucky and elk hunters who become very consistent. Most hunters don't have a system. They go out each day and just start hunting. Maybe they go back to where they were yesterday. Maybe they try a new drainage. Maybe they follow fresh sign or chase a bugle, but there's no real structure behind those decisions. So every single day becomes a reset. They're not building on anything. They're not learning patterns. They're not refining anything over time. They're just reacting to what's in front of them. And when you hunt like that, results feel random because they are. That's why one day might feel promising and the next feels like you're starting over from scratch. Elk hunting can make you feel that way even when you do have a plan. So it's even worse when you don't have a plan. And the shift here is simple, but it changes everything. You need a repeatable process. So you'll hear me talk about this a lot in a lot of videos. We're going to locate, we're going to evaluate, we're going to position ourselves accordingly, and we're going to execute. And last, and probably not talked about enough, we're going to adjust as needed. So you locate elk or sign. You evaluate what it means, movement, direction, and timing. You position yourself accordingly based on that information. You execute when the opportunity develops, not just because you're trying to force it. And then you adjust based on what you learned. Now you're not guessing anymore, you're building. Every day connects to the next. Each decision has a purpose. Each encounter teaches you something you can apply moving forward. That's how consistency is created, not from experience alone, but from structured experience. Because at the end of the day, random decisions create random results. Reason number six elk hunters fail is because they never close the gap. Execution failures. This is where a lot of elk hunts quietly fall apart. Not in the planning, not in the hiking, not even in the finding of elk. It happens in the final moments. A lot of elk hunters can get close. They can locate elk. They can move into the area. They can create some level of opportunity and encounter. But when it comes time to close the gap, let's say that last 100 yards or last 50 yards, everything starts to break down. Wind gets ignored or misread. Movement gets rushed. Noise increases without you realizing it. Or the opposite happens. They hesitate. They wait too long. They overthink the shot. They lose the moment because they weren't ready to act when everything finally lined up. And elk don't give you many chances. That final distance is where everything matters most. It's where wind becomes critical. It's where every step, every sound, every small decision you make either holds the opportunity together or it ends instantly. And a lot of elk hunters don't realize how often they're getting this close. They walk away thinking they're never going to have a real chance, when in reality, they were right there. They just couldn't finish the job. That's the difference between effort and success. Getting close is not rare. Finishing the job is rare. And until you sharpen that final phase, your wind discipline, your movement, your ability to stay composed under pressure, you're going to keep repeating the same cycle, because the truth is simple here. Getting close isn't the goal. Finishing well is. If you step back and look at all this together, one thing should stand out. Failure in elk hunting is not random. It's pretty predictable. It follows patterns. It comes from the same mistakes, repeated over and over without being recognized and then corrected. And that's why so many elk hunters stay stuck in the same cycle year after year. They work hard. They get close. They have moments that feel promising, but the outcome never really changes. Not because they're incapable, but because they're operating inside a system that they don't fully understand. And until that part changes, the results aren't going to come either. The difference between the elk hunters who struggle and the ones who become consistent is not talent usually. It's definitely not luck, and it's not even experience on its own. It's more awareness, it's structure, it's understanding how these pieces all connect: behavior, pressure, positioning, wind, and execution, and making decisions based on that, not just reacting in the moment. You don't fix this by tweaking one thing. You fix it by changing how you approach the entire elk hunt. Because once you start thinking in terms of systems instead of isolated moves, everything is going to begin to line up. And that's when consistency starts to show up. If you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and then how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. If you want hands-on application and real-time breakdowns, we have an in-person Elk Camp 2026 that is built around this same philosophy: structure, preparation, and execution in real terrain. 90% of Elk Camp is going to be running you through scenarios. You can check that out at backboneunlimited.com. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.